Julie Gunlock from the Independent Women's Forum, thank you so much for joining us in studio today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So Thursday of this week, we have the IWF Women's Lead Conference in Washington, D.C. I'm really excited about this. Still an opportunity, I think, to grab one of the last few seats available, right?
Not a lot of seats available, but you can still RSVP. Go to IWF.org. In the top corner, there's an events tab. If you click that, you can find information on the event and also RSVP. So a few tickets left. So now's your chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, because we're going to talk about the culture of alarmism, but one of the things I think we'll be talking about is the alarmism within the gun debate. And that brings us to Katie Couric.
It
the
does.
IWF, it does. And look, I mean, the IWF came out last week and said Katie Couric should be fired.
Yep.
For the deceptive editing in Under the Gun. The film's director originally came out and said, look, I'm sorry if anybody was bothered by this. I changed things because I wanted to insert a pause. Katie Couric said, I stand by the director, stand by the film. That didn't make the story go away, despite the fact that CNN, reliable sources, failed to cover this over the weekend. People are still talking about it. Monday night, Katie Couric issues another statement on the film's website, doesn't apologize. Says she regrets what happened, but doesn't say, hey, I'm sorry I made you gun owners look like you didn't have an answer to the question.
It was an apology that was like from the husband's school of apology. I'm sorry if you misunderstood. I'm sorry if you were offended.
It wasn't even the words I'm sorry.
I know.
No, it wasn't even that. That's
You're right.
the thing. The words I apologize aren't there. The words I'm sorry aren't there. And yet Variety, trade industry Bible, writes their headline, Couric apologizes for misleading documentary. I mean, there is so much to unpack here, Julie, because first we have to talk about the deceptive editing in the movie, but then we also have to talk about the media reaction to this. Look, there are some in the media like Eric Wimple who have been absolutely out front covering this. But it has to be said, there are a lot of media entities, including networks, who are happy to welcome Katie Couric on to promote this film, who don't want to talk about the problems now that they're appearing.
That's right. I mean, one of the reasons we put out a statement, and I was quoted actually in CNN and a couple other publications, the article that had my quote was on Drudge. But one of the reasons that my quote was picked up so much is that no one was calling for her firing. Certainly no one in the media was calling for her firing. I mean, one of the things I said is she's just like serial fabricator Brian Williams. And the same thing needs to happen to her. She needs to be dismissed from her position at Yahoo News, which she is the leader of their news broadcast. I mean, that says something. This is a woman who is a propagandist. She is a propagandist. This is when the media is taken over by the state. And so to push an agenda, she will fabricate her news story. I mean, this is really scary stuff. This is significant. This is serious stuff when a journalist as respected as Katie Couric is willing to totally fabricate stuff to push an agenda. That's not news. That is not impartial. She has become an activist, and she is a propagandist for these activist organizations. Honestly, she has no business being in the news anymore. If she wants to, she should now launch her career as a movie maker. She is a movie maker. If she wants to be a documentarian, that's fine. Many documentarians have an agenda that they push. That's fine. But she is no longer a journalist. By any standards of journalism, she does not meet those standards. It's very frightening when this kind of stuff happens.
And it's interesting because, again, she did a ton of press when this movie first came out. Now Brian Stelter, the host of Reliable Sources on CNN, says he didn't cover the story on Sunday because of the obscure nature of the film.
What?
Right? Because it's so obscure, right? Stephen Cruiser
Katie
told us
Couric.
there were billboards plastering L.A. For this movie. It got a deal with Epix to distribute this. Katie Couric herself was on the Today Show. She was on Stephen Colbert. She was the centerpiece of an entire episode of The Daily Show about gun control and attacking the NRA. And man, it's really obscure. Here's the thing. You're right. Katie Couric, even if you want to make that excuse, well, this film just really didn't, nobody knew about this film. People know who Katie Couric is.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
they do. She's a celebrity. She's like Oprah. She's like Tom Cruise. She has a household name, whatever she does. And she presents herself as an impartial newswoman who's looking for the facts. This is not true. She has an agenda and she's pushing it. And the idea that she would alter this film. I mean, this is really scary stuff. This is one of our premier journalists in this country willing to do this. Again, if this were Breitbart, okay, if this were Town Hall, if this were more of a right-leaning publication that had done this kind of editing, look, this is from the Jon Stewart School of Journalism, and we all know Jon Stewart isn't a journalist, so he can get away with this kind of creative editing. I mean, you go on the Jon Stewart show and you're not on his side, you don't sort of follow his or you're not on his side of the issue, you're going to be made a fool of. And now we're seeing these tactics used in mainstream journalism. So yeah, of course, the story here isn't necessarily about the documentary. It is about a journalist who is willing to put her reputation on the line to push an agenda. That's the story that CNN and all the others should have covered. And of course they didn't, because they share her opinion on this issue.
Well, they do. And so then let's talk about the actual film itself.
Sure.
If we can, for a little bit. Because even beyond the editing, which is, as you say, this is problematic. This is inexcusable. You also have to look at, this film purports to be a documentary about the gun debate, about gun violence in the United States. Julie, this film never mentions the fact that violent crime has been dropping in this country for more than 2 decades.
Right.
When Katie Couric signed on as the anchor of the Today Show back in 1991, there were thousands more homicides per year in the country than there are today.
Right.
We've got 75 million more Americans. We have fewer homicides today than we did when Katie Couric signed on in 1991. Right. None of that is even mentioned. None of that is even brought up. She says we're going to find these answers. Well, how can you talk about having the answers to quote-unquote gun violence when you aren't even acknowledging the fact that this type of crime has already been going down?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an inconvenient truth. I mean, we know that she's going to be selective about the information that she's presenting to her audience. And then again, what's even more disturbing is then when these gun rights advocates didn't say what she wanted or didn't pause, they had answers for her. We all know this. They had answers to her questions, and because of that, she simply edited out those answers. So look, this is again really discouraging to see this, and I'm glad to see that this. You said it was Epix. Has pulled the documentary.
Epix,
yeah. I'm glad to see that they've done that. That is the right and responsible thing to do. Let's see if Yahoo News reacts. They have really a problem on their hands. Americans don't trust Brian Williams anymore. They don't trust, and when these journalists are found out to be this way, look, I think people on the right, we see this every day. But when it is so raw and hard to deny, then I think it makes even people on the other side of the aisle go, that's not right. That's not fair play. So Yahoo News has a real problem on their hands that they're going to have to address.
They do. And, it's interesting. Going back to 2004, right after NRA News, Cam and Company first signed on, Mike Wallace, who was then at 60 Minutes, was the keynote speaker at a Brady campaign fundraiser held at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C., Julie. And we covered this. We were the ones who broke the story. CBS responded. They actually said that Mike Wallace would no longer be allowed to cover gun issues for 60 Minutes. They didn't fire him, but they said, look, he's kind of revealed where he stands on this issue, so we don't think it's right for him to cover this story. I think the media has fallen a long way since 2004. But, look, if Katie Couric were to even just come out and say this isn't objective, right? I do believe in gun control, and this is a pro-gun control film, should probably get a pass. From a lot of people. But instead, again, there's this claim of objectivity. There's the claim of I went into this with an open mind. And we don't even call it gun control. We call it gun safety because gun control freaks people out. There's this failure to acknowledge what is obvious to everybody else, right? And when you're a media figure and you fail to acknowledge something about yourself that is obvious to everybody else, You're right. You destroy your own credibility.
Yeah, but
look, everybody should know by watching this program, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I make no bones about it. I believe in the human right of self-defense. I believe in our constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I support these things. I don't try to hide it. What we have here is, again, one of the most recognizable names in the media who is hiding what is painfully obvious to everybody else.
Yeah, let's also say to Yahoo News, if they're not going to fire her based on the fact that she's basically a shill for these gun groups, what about lazy reporting? What about being a lazy journalist, right? I mean, she used editing tricks to make her point because she knows she was having trouble portraying these people as idiots. So she just used some clever editing tricks. That's lazy. That's bad journalism. And that's not doing your job. That's not digging for the facts. That's, anybody can be a clever editor. So I hope Yahoo takes some action here. If not, I'm sure most of the executives at Yahoo all agree with what she did. But they shouldn't applaud this type of journalism, which is, again, it's very, very lazy.
All right, talking again with Julie Gunlock from the Independent Women's Forum. You can follow IWF online at IWF on Twitter. Julie, remind me of your Twitter handle one more time because I don't have it right in front of me.
At jgunlock. Not so creative.
There you go.
Boring.
It's good, though. It's good. Yeah.
Well, when your last name is Gunlock, you don't really need to get more creative than that, right?
Exactly. Well, we're going to be talking about this and more again at the IWF Women's Lead Conference on Thursday in Washington, D.C. And I will see you in a couple of days, Julie. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Great. Thanks for having me.